Let me give you an example that's not counterfactual. Okay, so what I'm trying to suggest is that in many cases where you have this combination of contested values, high stakes, urgency, and science, uncertainty actually derives from the political context as well as from our understanding of the scientific context as well. So as the political stakes rise, as you get more scientists, more scientific perspectives and disciplines looking at a problem, as the policy relevance increases, so more people care about it, the uncertainty also tends to increase because you have more contestation both in the scientific and in the socio-political context. Next slide, please. So let me give you another example, also from neurosciences. Next, please. So this is the example of the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository. Many of you may have some at least passing familiarity with that case. I'm just going to tell a quick story about Yucca Mountain, but the overwhelming story is this.
Now joining.
It's been, Yucca Mountain's been the subject of intensive study, as many of you know, since the 1980s. It's been chosen by the US Congress as the repository for our high-level civilian nuclear waste, assuming that it could get scientifically certified. There's been significant political opposition locally, that is from the state of Nevada, since Congress made that choice. And there's been an enormous amount of science, more than $10 billion worth of research, making the Yucca Mountain site certainly the most studied plot of land on the planet. Okay. Nonetheless, not only have we not certified the site for storage, it's been, the Obama administration has actually taken it off the agenda, at least temporarily. This was after the Bush administration, prior to the Obama administration, was about to approve it. So I just want to tell one very simple story illustrating one aspect of the uncertainty that I think kind of helps you understand what's going on. So first, certainty is housed in the political ambitions of Harry Reid, who of course is the president of the Senate, one of the most powerful politicians in the country, and whose political fortunes depend on his preventing the site from being certified, because that is basically one of the positions that keeps him getting elected. So that doesn't change very much. On the other side, here is a schematic picture of chlorine-36 isotope. Chlorine-36 isotope is a bomb pulse isotope. Didn't exist before we did atmospheric nuclear tests. And of course, the Yucca Mountain site is very near the nuclear test site that was used for atmospheric tests in the 50s and early 60s. Okay, so very quickly, the story is this. There was about 10 years or 15 years of research done on the Yucca Mountain site, increasingly converging on a picture of the hydrological behavior of the site that showed it was very dry, and the models indicated it was dry enough to demonstrate that there would not be any transport of radioisotopes away from the site into potential, either into the environment or to potential water supplies for the 10,000-year period that the government has stipulated must be shown to be safe. Okay. So the models were converging on this picture of very low flow, very high degree of dryness and safety. And there were 3 major performance assessments done by DOE, all converging on a very low number for percolation flux. That is the amount of water flowing through the site. Okay. At some point, however, the National Academy of Sciences and the Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board, 2 independent assessment bodies, said, fine, we like your models, please drill a hole and take a look at what's happening down there. So, so DOE did. They created a tunnel that went down about 300 meters to the proposed test site, where they did find some water dripping into the site, which wasn't a big surprise. And they tested the water for a variety of chemicals to characterize it. And one of the things they discovered was chlorine-36. That was a huge surprise to everybody, because what that meant was water got from the surface down to 300 meters below in about 50 years, which meant that their model of pore flow, which was much slower than that and was used in the models, must be wrong. So this blew the whole thing up in terms of the rationale for why Yucca Mountain was a good site, and fueled controversy, provided much more ammunition for people like Harry Reid and environmental groups and scientists who were against putting nuclear waste there, and seemed to throw everything into disarray. DOE said, well, okay, but we accept this, but we also don't really believe it. And so we want to run the isotopic analysis again. So the first analysis has been done at Los Alamos Lab. So they said, well, let's have a competing lab do it, and that means Lawrence Livermore Lab, the other weapons lab, who also had technical capability of assessing chlorine-36. So they were given water samples from the site. They ran the numbers, and they said, there's no chlorine-36. Your samples were contaminated, Los Alamos. Now what do you do? Well, Los Alamos ran it again and asserted that, yes, indeed, there was chlorine-36. Lawrence Livermore ran it again and said, no, you're wrong, it's contamination. And then finally, a third party was called out, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, asked to do the analysis, and they said, we can't tell. So, again, Harry Reid's certainty is maintained through all this, as is the certainty of those who think it's a good site. And on the other hand, what looked perfectly certain before the chlorine-36 was discovered, that is, models that are showing year after year that the site's safe, and then looked very uncertain afterwards, the presence of chlorine-36, just simply got further destabilized under the force of all of these factors that are part of post-normal science, right? High stakes, need for a decision, contested values, difficult science. Okay, next slide. Now, so it turns out that what we mostly have around Yucca Mountain is a permanent repository for uncertainty. If there's a solution to the problem, it will be a political solution where the party in power will say, we got to put the stuff somewhere, this is as good a site as any, we're going to live with the uncertainty and take action. That may happen, or it may not happen. Next slide, please. But on the other hand, there are places that are dealing with this problem more effectively. And the point I want to make now is that what makes dealing with the problem more effective is not just that the science is good, but that the politics are smarter. So next slide. So Sweden also has a nuclear waste issue, and they have a significant number of reactors and lots of waste being generated. And even though they've said they're going to get off of nuclear power, they haven't actually started to do so, and they have to figure out what to do with their waste. And they took a different approach. They started out with a Yucca Mountain-like, US-like approach, where they were going to just, through their high-level political processes, decide on a site. But pretty much, they quickly realized that politically this was very, very difficult. And unlike the US, they didn't press ahead. They decided to step back and think about a different process. And their different process was something like this. They asked for volunteers. They identified a series of municipalities that they thought had the basic geological and technical attributes that would predict that a site might be viable. They announced what those municipalities were, and they asked which of those towns were willing to potentially sign up to be candidates for further assessment. And the process, first of all, was voluntaristic. It wasn't imposed. Secondly, it was framed in terms of kind of civic duty, responsibility. Thirdly, the process allowed any town that was being characterized to opt out any time that it wanted. Fourth, there was a reward, not just for the town that got chosen, but also for any towns that went to the final and didn't get chosen. So this created a disincentive for trying to prove that you were a better site than another and getting into these fights about uncertainty.